What would the ideal Genshin endgame content actually look like? With the release of the Imaginarium Theater, there's been a ton of discussion about what people like or dislike about it and what changes would make it better. And, of course, people have long had similar debates about the pros and cons of the Spiral Abyss. While I personally enjoy the IT and the Abyss, neither is quite what I really want. For one thing, both of them are just endless fights in a circular arena, which is in many ways the antithesis of the original appeal of the game. But more importantly, both game modes also have a big problem when it comes to replayability. Everyone enjoys different aspects of the game and no one approach would appeal to everyone, but it's still interesting to think through what kind of gameplay could exist for those of us who wish for something more. I'm not expecting Hoyo to add something new anytime soon, if at all, but here's what I wish would exist in Genshin. You start by picking one character from your entire roster, plus trial versions of all the characters on the current banners would also be available to use. Once you've chosen who to start with, you enter a series of domains. There are dozens of possible domains, all containing different objectives: chests to find, puzzles to solve, challenges to complete, battles to fight. At the end of each area are doors which lead to further domains, allowing you to choose what type to travel to next out of several randomized options. After you complete each challenge, you get to pick a reward, and each reward would both be useful on its own and stack together with others over the course of your exploration. You'd be able to add new characters to build out your team, pick powerful buffs, increase your movement speed, and so on. The further you get from the starting point, the harder the challenges become, leading to a climactic final battle at the end. Many elements of this will feel familiar if you've played the Simulated or Divergent Universe in Honkai Star Rail, the Elusive Realm in Wuthering Waves, or even the Labyrinth Warriors event from Genshin version 2.2, but there's a lot that I would change about each of those which influences what I have in mind. The details really matter. There's nothing all that new here, so why does this imaginary game mode feel so compelling to me compared to the existing endgame? How would it differ from the existing content? And how should it be structured to make it feel truly rewarding? The most notable departure from all of those existing game modes is that this would include a variety of gameplay. While much of it would still be focused on the combat, since that's where most of the challenge would come from, each area would include other stuff to do: secrets to find, puzzles to solve, skill challenges to complete, and so on. I love the gameplay loop while exploring in Genshin, especially when you encounter a series of interconnected puzzles which build on top of one another before giving you an even bigger reward, so it's always felt like a missed opportunity that we get none of this in the endgame content. I'd hope to see a mix of different challenges. Of course, there are many to include from Genshin's open world, and many from past events would bring even more variety, but even better if some could be more specifically tailored to the character you pick. Archery challenges for bow users are an obvious one, which I always enjoyed in the open world, but to give a different example, for sword users, we could take inspiration from Coast of Tsushima, which has bamboo strike challenges which are surprisingly satisfying. Element-specific ones would be interesting too, even if they're just as simple as using a cryo character to ice bridge over some deadly poisoned water. Challenges which are even more tailored to each character, like the envisaged Echoes domains, would be even more welcome. And this extra variety would also carry over to the combat gameplay. For one thing, instead of a bland circular arena, the battles would take place in varied terrain with obstacles and environmental hazards for you to make use of. I'd love to be able to use strategies like luring enemies into shallow water in order to apply hydro to them, or using Anemo to swirl pyro from a campfire onto them to set up reactions, or heck, just fighting in the rain can be a welcome change. Those kinds of interactions make the combat in the overworld feel richer and more rewarding, but once you're further into the game, there's little point to it since the enemies are too weak. It's always been a disappointment to me that the endgame lacks this aspect completely, and the combat challenges themselves should be more varied. I'd want some areas where you have to fight off hordes of powerful enemies where the challenge is to just survive long enough, and maybe some which are, again, more tailored to the character you pick, like a robot with 90% damage resistance until you hit its weak spots if you play an archer, which would reward skill or understanding of the game's mechanics. Combat in Genshin can be fun, but not only does the current endgame focus on the most basic combat possible, there's so much more to the game than that as well. An endgame mode which makes full use of it all would be so much more engaging. A more subtle point is that my dream endgame would provide a sense of progression. This is an easy detail to miss, but makes a huge difference to how enjoyable these game modes feel, and it's one which both Genshin's endgames get wrong. The only progression in the Abyss is that enemies get stronger, so the further you get, the more challenging it is. If you can beat the content, this just makes the earlier floors feel like a waste of time, while for those who aren't quite there yet, it makes the harder levels a painful experience. Hoya announced that we'll be able to skip the earlier floors after an upcoming update if we've completed them previously. That's positive in one sense, but does mean there's even less to do. And the IT is arguably even worse. In an average run, you're at your strongest near the beginning, and it's slowly downhill from there, since you either tend to end up with fewer and fewer options as you continue through the fight, or you struggle with odd teams to save your stronger ones for the bosses. We want the opposite of that. The elusive realm in Wuwa really nails this. Your character gets noticeably more powerful throughout, and by the end of it, you feel incredibly strong. The enemies are souped up too, so it's still a challenging fight, but it feels amazing when you get it right. For this, the common pattern of picking from 2 to 3 different buffs in between domains really is a decent starting point. Both existing Genshin endgames include this in some form, and in both cases it's very underwhelming at the moment. The power-ups are weak and tend to just have no effect on gameplay at all, though at least there's scope for them to fix that. But I really want this to be taken a lot further. For example, it would be pretty interesting if this were to be tied back to the elemental system. Let's take some inspiration from the elusive realm here. Each power-up could be associated with an element. This association could either be consistent, for example, all crit power-ups could be cryo, attack ones always pyro, HP always hydro, and so on. Or it could be randomized so that there's more flexibility. For each power-up you pick, you gain more elemental investment points for that card's associated element, and when you collect several from one element, you can use them to unlock further rewards. For example, perhaps this would be the way to unlock new characters. To build out a team, you'd have to be strategic about which buffs you pick, since you'd need to focus on cards which give you the right investment. If you started with a pyro character and want to aim for a vaporized team, you'd pick cards with hydro and anemo so that you can quickly buy characters who bring those elements. Even better, the same investment points could be used to temporarily level up those characters' talents to make them more powerful, or even unlock their constellations. 5 stars would cost more investment than 4 stars, and maybe their cost could be based on usage statistics, so there would be some advantage to trying out non-meta characters. This system would introduce a level of forward planning and strategy which is absent from the Abyss and obscured by RNG in IT, while ensuring that the further players delve into this mode, the more powerful they feel. And that leads to another huge problem with the existing endgame in Genshin: replayability. For me at least, both the IT and the Abyss are at best half an hour of gameplay per refresh, since once I've had a successful run, there's no incentive to return until the next round. Less than an hour every 2 weeks is laughable puddle of content when what we really want is a deep well. Instead, I want replayability, and the variety we'd get through the points explored so far only gets us partway there. To make it truly shine, the new endgame would need a reward structure which leans into these things. Let's imagine we get a similar amount of rewards as the current endgame. The Abyss provides 800 primogens per month, while the IT provides 620. In both cases, you get most, if not all, of the rewards dumped on you in one go. People who don't get them all in one run have a painful struggle to get the remaining stars, while people who get everything have no incentive to play anymore. If it followed the same pattern, this new game mode would probably just give out all the primogens once you beat the final boss, or something along those lines. Just like the IT and Abyss, replaying would feel aimless. Instead, the rewards should be split down into much smaller chunks, given out for completing the content in different ways. They should be designed to reward players for trying different things, either by giving out small amounts of primogens for each challenge, or by giving out a new currency which you can use to buy not only those primos, but other items like character, weapon and artifact materials, mora, and so on as well. For starters, there would be some rewards to encourage playing with different characters. We could get a small amount per weapon type, plus some more per element, or even some for triggering specific reactions during combat. Structuring it like that would mean that you'd get some of these rewards even if you only bothered to play it once, and it would be a great incentive to spread out beyond your favorite characters and teams without being too big a problem for those who hate one specific element or weapon type. Even better if there were some specific rewards for using banner characters, since as mentioned earlier, they should be available as trial characters even if you don't have them. This would allow people to truly get a feel for them, which in my experience tends to result in people wanting to pull for the character more. Extra rewards for playing with the specific characters would make sure people give them an honest try. And those are just the basics. There could be some which reward you for collecting a certain number of cards for each element, one for finding all the puzzles along the way, one for completing a run without any character dying, and so on. The perfect well of inspiration for this is Genshin's achievements, which have hundreds of one-off challenges, many of which could be adapted to encourage and reward different approaches in this new endgame. Of course, some might complain that this dilutes the amount of Primogems they earn per hour of endgame playtime, which is why I personally lean towards making the Primos purchasable via the shop rather than in smaller chunks directly from completing challenges. Either way, the point here is that if this game mode is fun, then in the end everyone wins. Goals like collect all the available Hydro buff cards or complete a run with Amber as your main would give a sense of purpose and challenge players to really get to grips with the game at a deeper level than the current content. And those extra rewards like EXP materials would absolutely encourage many to come back after they've collected all the Primogems, especially if the game mode is enjoyable in its own right. Even more so if they also include a Genshin equivalent of Star Rail's self-modeling resin. And yes, this point is inspired by the frankly fantastic way WooWa structured their rewards for the Elusive Realm. And on that note, taking more inspiration from the Elusive Realm and Divergent Universe, I'd particularly love it if some of the rewards you gain for completing a run could be used to buy buffs which make you more powerful in future runs. IR has a fairly simple version of this. There's a skill tree containing minor buffs which you can unlock using points gained by completing the domains. You also get more points for completing with higher difficulty levels, rewarding players further for challenging themselves. I really like this system, but think it, again, could be made more interesting. For example, the elemental points from the buff card system explored earlier could be brought back into play here. Imagine if any points you have left over at the end of the run could be available to spend in the skill tree. This would introduce a trade-off, where you could either spend points in order to make your character significantly more powerful for that current attempt, or hoard them so that you can buy weaker but more long-lasting upgrades. By connecting these disparate systems together, we introduce more layers of strategy, more ways to play, and even more incentive to keep coming back. Exactly what I'd want. There's so much more which could be added to this kind of game mode which would make it both fun and replayable. If it were to exist, then the one I'd most wish for would be a version we can take on as an extra challenge with friends in co-op. Overall, I just want an endgame which is so fun that people would play it just because they enjoy it, and which has a reward structure which guides people towards its positives. It's taken literal years for Hoyoverse to release just one new endgame mode, and while I enjoyed it a lot, the general reaction was one of disappointment. While I feel like it's very unlikely we'll see a third mode added anytime soon, it's still fun to theorize about what could exist, and figure out ways they could lean into the strengths of the game and avoid its pitfalls. Who knows, if people start giving more constructive feedback, Hoyo might even listen. Until next time!